Hello friends, welcome back to Wow IAS. Welcome to the discussion on Vision IAS Mains 365 Internal Security. So this is part 4 of the lecture series. Hope you have seen the other 3 parts. If you have any issues or any queries, you can get back to us via the comments. Okay. So before we begin, just a small information. A lot of you are asking regarding the source of the discussion. So the document what we are using for the discussion is the summary document. It is a summary document of the Mains 365. So this summary document you can get by subscribing from our Telegram channel. The Telegram channel details are there in the description. Now let's quickly begin. So the third topic what we have is the terrorism. So terrorism is an important topic from the internal security point of view. So if you see terrorism, so recently Institute for Economics and Peace has released the Global Terrorism Index 2020, and it has placed India, or you can say it has ranked India as the 8th most affected country by terrorism in 2019. So India is affected by a lot because of terrorism, the terrorism which is coming from Kashmir and all. And also we have these secessionist tendencies and secessionist movements that are happening even in the northeast. So India is affected by this terrorism. So now what is India's strategy to counter the terrorism? The basic strategy, if you see, the first is political consensus. So union government having intensive interaction with the states and the union territories while drawing up of national strategy. The next one is good governance and social development, socio-economic development, that is planning of development and doing development in these interior locations and all, so that when the people see the seeds, or you can say when the people see the benefits of the governance, then easily they will not get attracted to these kind of extremist things. That is the thing. And also respect for rule of law, that is the government agencies not transgressing, or you can say they are not going above the law, and they deal everything within the purview of the law. That is the thing. Next one is countering subversive terrorist activities. This is also another thing. So this is mainly to ensure that special laws and special enforcement mechanisms and special forces are involved to prevent its misuse, and making sure everything making sure everything is happening in a proper way. Okay, so that means more of military measures are taken to counter terrorism and all, and also proper legal framework to deal with everything properly, so that even the law enforcement also have certain rights, certain privileges to deal with things. Next one is capacity building in terms of intelligence as well as security, civil administration, society, everything. Okay, so capacity building militarily, building intelligence, everything comes under the capacity building. Now India's counter-terrorism measures. So India's counter-terrorism measures, if you see at national level, we have the National Investigation Agency, which is basically created after the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. So this National Investigation Agency is the India's premier investigation agency when we talk about terrorism. Next one, the NATGRID. So NATGRID is the National Intelligence Grid. Basically, it is still yet to be completely deployed. It's still under construction, we can say. This is basically an intelligence grid where this grid will have access to all the major things like the airport travels, like the bus travels, train travels, everything. So that using big data and all these analytic tools, they will be able to identify the patterns of the terrorists and all, so that in the future we can prevent the terrorist attacks. These kind of intelligence grids are there with all the big intelligence agencies, be it the CIA or be it the Mossad and all these agencies. Next one is the NSG, National Security Guards, the special, or you can say the premium security forces who deal with these terrorist activities. The UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. These are the things that we have. At international level, India has prioritized the adoption of the intergovernmental framework to combat terrorism through UN resolution-like measures to prevent terrorists from acquiring weapons of mass destruction, conventional prohibition of the use of nuclear weapons, the proposal to comprehensive convention on terrorism. This proposal is still not yet finalized. US-India Homeland Security Dialogue, and Mumbai is now part of the global network of cities to fight terrorist activities. This is also there. Countering terrorist financing by becoming part of the global regime like the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, BRICS counter-terrorism strategy, and Sangha Convention on combating terrorism, suppression and extremism. These are the international frameworks, and these are the national frameworks. So here we have both national and international frameworks. Both of them we can use it while writing the answers. Okay, so now let's briefly talk about the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The UAPA basically was passed in 1967. Okay, so this is mainly to prevent the terrorist activities. Recently, Home Ministry has reported that there is 72% rise in the number of UAPA cases in 2019 compared to that of 2015. So the number of terrorist cases are rising, because if you see, the terrorism comes from Pakistan. Also, currently Afghanistan is being ruled by the Talibans, and also ISIS is rising in the world. So because of all of these reasons, terrorism is bound to increase even in future. Next one is the powers with the next one is the basic introduction about this UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act of 1967. It was enacted to provide effective prevention of certain unlawful activities of individuals and associations for dealing with terrorist activities and related matters. It defines the unlawful activities as any action taken by the individual or association that leads to cessation of part of Indian territory, questions India's sovereignty, or disrupt the integrity of the country. For this, the government has various powers under this act. It is basically like the powers are commits or the person can declare a person as terrorist if he commits or participates in terrorism, if he is preparing for terrorism, if he promotes terrorism, or if he is involved in terrorism in any or the other way. And government can impose ban on these kind of associations under the UAPA. Government can even declare a terrorist under UAPA. Government can declare both Indian nationals as well as foreign nationals under this act. Okay, and the investigation is basically done by the National Investigation Agency along with the state police also. And appeal mechanism, this provides for tribunal to review or hear an appeal against the ban. These are the major things. And amendments were done timely to ensure or to make the law more stricter. The recent amendment of 2019 gave NIA special powers. It empowered NIA to investigate these kind of cases. So you can say the inspector rank and above will be investigating these kind of cases directly. It added International Convention for Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism to the schedule under this act, the 2019 Amendment Act. Other anti-terrorist laws, if we see in India, so earlier we have the TADA of 1987. It was repealed in 2004 because already we have the UAPA. Next, the POTA we used to have, the Prevention of Terrorist Act of 2002. This was also repealed in 2004 because multiplicity of the acts will duplicate the work. So that's why this was also repealed. Next, we have the Maharashtra Control of Organized Crime MCOCA of 1999. It is currently in force. It is by the state government of Maharashtra. So next one is the GCOCA, that is Gujarat Control of Terrorism and Organized Crime, which was passed in 2019. So basically, tomorrow, if in exam, in prelims, if there is a question stating that a person can be declared as terrorist only by the central government or only by the parliament, this will be wrong, because even against terrorism, we have the state acts as well. Okay. Now, what is the significance of UAPA in the contemporary times? The significance of UAPA is basically, if you see, there is rising terrorism across the world. That is the first thing. Second thing, since 2001, 8,473 Indians have died in the hands of terrorists. And terrorists and insurgents, they continue to receive support from the countries like Pakistan, China, China, though directly we don't have any proofs, but still China is instigating these kind of movements in the northeast and all. And also, there are terrorist groups in the Middle East and all. So to prevent, or you can say to stop all of these people to come to India and do anti-national activities, these kind of acts are necessary. And also focus now is on the individuals, not designating earlier the individuals as terrorists would give them an opportunity to circumvent the law. But now individuals also can be declared as terrorists. It quickens the justice delivery system. Okay, because an officer of the rank of inspector and above, they can directly participate in the investigation and they can close the cases. It also reduces delay in attaching the proceeds, because this act allows seizure of property, okay, without taking approval of the DGP in case of investigation, which is conducted by an NIA, by the National Investigation Agency. So these are the very significance of this. Now, what are the challenges to this UAPA? There are various challenges. Obviously, when a law is such powerful, obviously there will be challenges by the human rights activists and all, because this will go against the basic constitution. This is the first thing. Okay, this is the first thing. And the next one is the low conviction rate. Only 2.2% of cases registered under the UAPA between 2016 and 19, they resulted in conviction by the courts. So this low conviction rate is a great concern. Okay, and this act provides for appeal, but the government itself will set up a 3-member review committee, or 2 of whom can be serving bureaucrats. So even the tribunal is there, they are appointed by the government. So how can they be neutral is the question that arises. Next one is, as I said already, it is challenging the fundamental rights 14, 19, 21. And excessive power is given to the law enforcement agencies. Yes, it is given, but these kind of things are needed for the national security, and also the definitions basically are vague. Okay. The next topic what we have is the FATF, Financial Action Task Force. So recently Pakistan has, it was placed under this FATF. Even Turkey was placed under the FATF. So what is this? Sorry, FATF grey list. So what is this FATF? What is this Financial Action Task Force? Recently, Pakistan has failed to comply with its deadline to prosecute and penalize terrorist financing in the country. So it is now continuing in the grey list only. So FATF basically is a global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. It sets international standards to prevent illegal activities and also the harm they cause to the society. It has 37 members and 2 regional organizations, European Commission and Gulf Cooperation Council. It was established in July 1989 by the G7 summit in Paris to examine and develop measures to combat money laundering. It expanded its mandate to include efforts to combat terrorist financing and to counter financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. It established a series of special recommendations to combat terrorism, which outlined measures to deprive terrorists and terrorist organizations of the access to funding and financial system. The sources of terrorist financing vary from legitimate funds like donations and money derived from charities to unlawful funds deriving from drug trafficking, money laundering, smuggling, and illegal trading, etc. Now, what is the role of FATF in combating the terrorist financing? So, the role, if you see, first of all, it sets global standards to combat terrorist financing. It evaluates countries' ability to prevent, detect, investigate, and prosecute terror financing. This is the second thing, because under this we have the blacklist and the grey list. The blacklist is a high-risk jurisdiction subject to a call for action, and the next one is the grey list, which is also known as the jurisdiction under continuous monitoring. These are the things that are available. Okay, and FATF recommendations and other reports to help will definitely help the countries basically to combat this kind of money laundering and other illegal activities which can go against the traditional governments and all. So this is the major challenge. So FATF will definitely help in these things because it provides intelligence, it provides support, it even provides key policy measures that has to be taken. So a lot of things will be done. Okay, so basically these are the things. And moving to the next topic what we have is bioterrorism. After the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen everyone is talking about this bioterrorism because tomorrow what can happen is that in future when there is a war and all, if these kind of viruses are released into the atmosphere, if these kind of viruses are released into a country, then this will create havoc in that country. And this is very much possible because the level of research which is being done today, the humans can face a threat because of the research that is happening. The human can become extinct if such things continue, we can say. So recently, Parliamentary Panel has highlighted the need for the government to have laws to counter bioterrorism in its report, The Outbreak of Pandemic COVID-19 and Its Management. So bioterrorism, as I said already, is the planned and deliberate use of pathogenic strains of microorganisms like bacteria, virus, or the toxins to spread the life-threatening disease on a mass scale in order to devastate the population of an area. These agents are delivered by Scud missiles, motor vehicles with spray, hand pump sprayers, boats, ladders, remote control robots, etc. by any way. And these are very difficult to monitor as well because we will never know the source. That is very, very difficult because currently we are seeing what issue we are facing with regarding to this COVID-19. Even though the world knows that it is from China, China is blatantly denying because China knows that getting a proof is very, very difficult. Getting a proof that China is involved in this thing is very, very difficult. So China is blatantly, you can say, denying everything. What is the need for a bioterrorism law in India? India is a very high population density country, and also currently we don't have enough medical facilities. We have the subtropical climate, so the transmission rate will be faster, poor hygiene and inadequate sanitation facilities in India. So India is very much vulnerable to these kind of attacks. And the bioterrorism, basically, it will cause panic, it will cause fear in the minds of the people. This can destabilize the society at large. And also increased attacks of this kind is very much possible in these times because of the technologies that are available today. The world has moved a lot. We are talking about biotechnology, we are talking about nanotechnology, we are talking about all the new technologies, the software in health, the robotics in health. So when there is advancement, obviously on the other side it will have certain disadvantages. This is the disadvantage of all these developments that we are facing. So bioterrorism agents, if you see, there are 3 categories: category A, B and C. Category A is the high proximity agents that pose a risk to the national security because they can easily be disseminated or transmitted from person to person, and this result in high mortality cases, for example anthrax, etc. Next one is the category B. The second highest priority agents include the bacillus, or you can say it is the brucellosis. glanders, etc. Next one is the category C. It includes emerging pathogens that could be engineered to mass decimation or in the future. For example, engineering infection diseases such as Nipah and hantavirus. These are the basic viruses. Now, what are the mechanisms to deal with bioterrorism? What is the mechanism? The first one is the deterrence by law. We need a proper law. Currently, we don't have laws. Currently, we are dealing all these things by the Epidemic Disease Act of 1987. And under this epidemic disease also, under this act also, there is no specific bioterrorism or these things. Okay, it did not define it. Next one is prevention. If you see, so prevention is not that easy because of the advancements of technology. Okay, but with proper research and all, to a certain extent, we can try to fight these kind of threats. Okay, and also we need more of surveillance and assessment, and also health facilities has to be improved. The laboratory investigation has to be done. That means the research facilities have to improve. The medical management can include prevention, promotion, curative services like the chemo prevention to prevent the spread. General public sensitization with regarding to these kind of viruses and all. This has to be done by the law enforcement agencies through skill and education, through training and education. And also hospitals have to be made aware about these kind of things which can happen in future. Okay. So existing measures, these are the existing measures it is given here. The Epidemic Disease Act, the National Disaster Management Authority, the Integrated Disease Surveillance Project, all of these things are there, and initiatives at international level. If you see, the Biological Weapon Convention, which is the first disarmament treaty banning the development, production and stockpiling of bacteriological and toxin weapons. The Interpol Bioterrorism Prevention Unit, the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, these are the things that we have. Okay, these are domestic as well as the international mechanisms what we have, right? So that's it guys for this lecture. I'll see you again in the next lecture. Okay, before I leave, a small information. Currently, we are running an offer where you can get the Vision Mains 365 and Vision Mains Test Series summaries at a price of 1500 rupees only. At a price of 1500 rupees only. This is, you can say that the value what these documents are going to provide, this cannot be matched. This cannot be matched with this, because you can easily cover a Mains 365 in just 1 hour with these kind of summaries, and you can use these videos to supplement the summaries. And also the Mains Test Series, if you have a summary of all the test series, it will be very easy for you to revise. Because what is Mains? Mains is all about revision, recollection. Mains is all about revision and recollection. So these things can be done easily with these kind of tools. So do make the best use of this initiative. The details are there in the Telegram channel. The Telegram channel details are there in the description. You can just go and watch it. Okay. So thank you. I'll see you again. Jai Hind.